today Emma and I will introduce ourselves first. I know y'all have worked with Emma before, but I am kind of a new face. So I guess I'll introduce myself first, and then Emma, if you want to go after me.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So my name is Sean. I am a senior at UNC Chapel Hill. I study psychology with a minor in Chinese. And my abroad experience in the past, I've actually moved around a lot while I was younger. I was born in England, and I then moved to Germany for about 4 years. Right before I started public school, I moved to Canada. And so I lived in Canada for about 9 years, all the way up to middle school. And then the beginning of high school, I moved to Kansas here in the US. And then lived in Kansas for 3 years. And then my senior year of high school was in North Carolina. And then I started university here, and that's where I've been. But while I've been here, I studied abroad in England my sophomore year in Brighton. But I've also spent a lot of time in China because my parents are both Chinese and they're first generation immigrants. So we visited back multiple times. So today I'll be focusing more on China.
All right. Hi, guys. I'm Emma, and I am a global studies and Italian double major here at UNC. I'm also a senior. And the first time I studied abroad was in high school. I lived in Italy for a semester. And then I have since been back. I went over one summer to work as an au pair for a family, like a nanny. And then I've also, again, studied abroad, but in a different part of Italy, in Bologna. And that's kind of a quick summary of my study abroad experience.
Cool. So I guess to start off this lesson, I know, and we both know that y'all been studying kind of the ideas of stereotyping and miscommunication or misconception, or and misinterpretation and everything. So some questions to start off. What are some stereotypes y'all have about the two countries that we're going to talk about, Italy and China? So if you want to turn to a partner and kind of like come up with some stereotypes or ideas you have about these two places, and then share with us after a minute or so. Just turn to like a shoulder buddy and then take a minute or so and jot down some ideas if you have any, or if you want to just mentally jot it down, and then
I'll ask you to share some of them.
Yeah. There we go. Yeah.
Okay, so you have some thing stories about them being the place with pizza and stuff like that, pizza. And then the thing story about their mafia.
Okay. Would you repeat the second thing you said? It was breaking up a little bit.
Well, I remember we talked about mafia and Carolina.
Yes, those are definitely some common stereotypes.
A stereotype about China, well, two could be all their students are smart. Oh, I thought she said something about China.
Yeah, no, you're right about both of our countries. So
yeah,
do you have any about China? All students are smart, yes.
Okay, and that all Chinese people or Asian people look alike.
Awesome. Thank you for coming up with some of those. We'll definitely hit on those. I know I definitely will with my some of the things I'm going to talk about. And then how about flipping the table around or turning the table? What do you think some people have about stereotypes about Americans, or even more specifically North Carolinians? If you want to turn to a buddy again for about half a minute or 30 seconds and then come up and share.
Okay, so a single story about America is that some people may think that we eat a lot and that we eat a bunch of junk food.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good one.
Another stereotype that people have about America is that we're too privileged and another one might be that we all like waste food and we don't appreciate stuff like we're very privileged.
Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Is there any more else? Anyone else have any comments?
So I guess like that we're not as smart as like China and
Gotcha.
Japan. China.
Gotcha. All right, thank you all for sharing with those. It's always nice to kind of see both perspectives of things and kind of question these stereotypes. But yeah, we're going to go into kind of like, are these true? Are these false? Is there some truth to each of them? But I guess I'll start with my presentation and then Emma will come after me. But I know also that y'all have been working with your section or the section about misconceptions, mainly about that first, about China. So I was wondering if y'all can give me some ideas of the stereotypes or misconceptions that you've already learned in class about. If there are some on the screen, I just kind of put down some ones that I thought about. But if there's more that you didn't see on the screen, if you want to add and talk to me about, and then we can talk more about it. But I can just say what I've put up so far. I think there's an idea that because there's so many Chinese restaurants here, that most people just work in Chinese restaurants, and that's what their job is, and a lot of people, and that's all over the US. And there is some history with that. And then martial arts that everyone knows, karate or taekwondo and all that stuff. Funny story is there was a summer when I went to Haiti to do a service trip, and when I was working with the orphanage there, or the kids there, when they first saw me, they were kind of taken aback because I don't think they were very much exposed to people of Asian descent. And a lot of them, the first thing they said to me was either Jackie Chan or karate. And I was very much like, what? That's my firsthand experience with that. The idea that Chinese people are bad drivers, and that y'all mentioned earlier, all Chinese people look alike. Is there anything else that I didn't mention up here, other than what you mentioned earlier as well, maybe, that y'all talked about in class?
Yeah, that one of them might be that they're all smart.
Right. Mm-hmm. I'll definitely dive into that later. Anything else?
Nail salon.
Nail salons. Mm-hmm.
Our Chinese
I don't think I heard anything really. I mean, I couldn't really hear anything. If someone wants to repeat it loudly, or if there's nothing else. Okay, cool. Or is there more? Or no? Okay, we can continue. Awesome. So with all those ideas in hand, I'm going to go specifically. Yeah.
They wanted to say it, but they were thinking about politically correct, so they said cats and dogs.
Oh, got you. No, like eating. Yes, that is definitely yeah. I remember when I was small, actually, elementary school. Definitely, someone when they first met me, the first question they asked was like, "Do you eat dogs?" And I was like, "No, I don't." No, but yes, that's definitely something that is a stereotype or idea that people have. So I wanted to go through these 3 statements, and I wanted to see what y'all might interpret it as, or how these statements or these actions or behaviors might be misinterpreted, and I'll give you like an other side to it. Okay? So if someone is slurping their food or slurping their soup or smacking their lips while they're eating, what might you take that as?
They got no manners. They ain't got no manners.
Right, they have no manners. It's kind of rude, right? Here in America, the culture here takes that as like, oh, why are you like eating so sloppily and stuff, right? But over in China, or like in the culture of China, in a lot of places, if you slurp a soup, it kind of means that it's very tasty. You're trying to make it, your behaviors kind of show that, oh, this is so enjoyable that I'm going to make it very visually obvious that it's so enjoyable, as well as the smacking lips. So it kind of gives you like an opposite side to what and why these behaviors are. How about the second one? Refusing for someone else to pay or help pay with something.
Right, and that they're crazy. That person might think that they like that person can't afford what they got.
Can someone just like come up to the screen and say that? I'm kind of having a hard time hearing.
Some people refuse to pay because they think that you might think that they don't have enough money to afford.
Right, yeah. So like the idea that refusing, if, for example, sometimes if someone else is like constantly offering to pay, I might take that as in that they think that I don't have the means to be able to pay, or I don't have my personal independence to pay or stuff. But in Chinese culture, it is very common to always cater to the guest and always cater to someone else. So there's always, and it's really funny, but with my family especially, when we're eating out with family friends who are Chinese, there's always this war going back and forth on who's going to pay, because no one wants the other person to pay because it's out of respect and out of gratitude for them to be with us and such. And then the last one, being extremely close in physical proximity when in a group. So if you had an experience of waiting in line and someone was like really close to you, what would you feel that is? Like, is that a negative response or anything?
Like, they don't know, like, personal space, like they don't know manners again.
Yeah, exactly. I think in American culture, personal space is something that's very valued. We see it in a lot of like, I mean, even how the classroom is set up, right? We have our individual study area. When we go out to eat, we have those like individual tables that we have. But in China, because of the huge population, it is very common that everywhere you go is going to have an extremely high amount of people there. And so a lot of people kind of are already used to the high density of people around you, that there's not really much of a personal space. I felt this really closely when I went back to China 2 summers ago for the first time in a very long time. And we're trying to get on a boat. And everyone was trying to get on the boat at the same time. And there wasn't really a form of a line or anything. And so people were just pushing and pushing and pushing. And everyone seemed to just go on everyone's business, and like shoulder by shoulder, or like the back of someone's head was in my face. It was really extremely uncomfortable for me. But as I was talking through it with my dad, he was saying how it's very common for people just to like, because if there's less space between people, the easier people can get on the boat and everyone can get on the boat. So it's kind of the idea that the less space there are between people, the more people can fit in some place. So yeah, thank you for going through those with me. But I guess this kind of gives you an idea of like always thinking about the other side and thinking about the other perspective, even though it might seem rude or put offish. Always question, like, is this because I was raised this way? Or is this because this is what society tells me here in America that makes it seem rude and stuff? But what could you see and how could it be interpreted a different way? So going into what one of y'all said earlier about that Chinese people are just really smart and all they care about are grades. The stereotype of this, there is a kernel of truth to it, and it is stemmed through kind of the culture and history and traditions of China, specifically with Confucius. Have you ever heard of Confucius? If you have, can you raise your hand?
Yes.
Okay, so there seems like a good amount of you. Just to kind of like reiterate who Confucius was, he kind of was a philosopher, an idealist, and he had a lot of ideas that he taught and that has spread throughout China. One wouldn't say he is really a religious figure, more of like a philosopher. So he did have a lot of impact with how Chinese people behave and believe, and just the culture of China today. And one of his main ideas was how important education is. Here are two quotes that are translated from what he said, but he was also well known for doing a lot of talks and doing a lot of his teachings, and it was always, he encouraged people to come up and listen to him, and whoever wanted to sit down and listen to his teachings, he strongly encouraged that. And there was also the idea that he said of the importance of a teacher, and the relationship between an individual and the teacher is very strong and very highly valued. So you can see this in the classrooms in China. If you have ever visited or if you've heard or seen a real classroom, there's a lot of respect for the teacher. When the teacher walks into the room, everyone stands up. When the teacher calls on you to talk, you stand up individually and address it. When the teacher asks you to go clean the board or go get something for the teacher, that is actually a privilege to do. And so it's kind of different, I think, from the education here and how teachers are seen here. And that just stems in how Chinese culture was formed in these ideas from Confucius. So kind of just giving you an idea of the history behind maybe some of these stereotypes and the fact that there might be a little kernel of truth behind them, but that doesn't mean that you can generalize the whole body of people. I think that's kind of the goal I want to kind of drill into it, that these stereotypes become dangerous when it is that specific single lens, single story. I know y'all heard about that or listened to the TED Talk, but that's when it becomes dangerous, when you associate a whole group of people to this one idea and not see them as individuals. And you yourself know that you're such a unique individual, that every other person should also be seen that way as well. But yeah, I was just going through some of these. Let me double check on time real quick. Okay, there is a video, but I think we're kind of short on time, so we're just gonna go straight to Emma, and I can send the video to Miss Sanderlin, and y'all can watch it later, or it's fine if you don't, but it's, yeah, just talking about Asian stereotypes in media and such. But we can go on to Emma.
Hey guys, last time when we talked about single stories, we talked about the mafia. So today I'm going to kind of talk about a different misconception that maybe some Americans have regarding Italians. And that is that Italians are, you know, when we kind of look into Italian culture as Americans, Italians can be perceived from an American standpoint as lazy. They're always late. They're just not hardworking. And so this comes from kind of multiple different cultural aspects, I would say, that as Americans, we may just not understand, or they're just different than what are the norms here in America. Like what Sean was saying, what our society tells us is normal or right and wrong. And so kind of to start with, Italians, part of it stems from the fact that Italians, they don't really base their days on what Americans see as a typical timetable, or what Americans tend to see as a typical timetable. So what I mean by that is, I would say it's fairly common. And again, this is a little bit general, so it's not all the way across the board, but it's a pretty common start to a day in America is, you know, if you're going to work or school, you might wake up between 6 and 7 a.m., get to work by around 8, or school might be started even a little bit earlier. And that's common in America. That's, you know, how our weekdays typically start. But as a whole, that just isn't really how Italy operates. Most stores and businesses in Italy don't open up until 9 or 10. And again, this varies across the country. In the southern part of Italy, it could maybe even be a little bit later. In some of the big cities, it could be earlier. So it depends, but it typically is a little bit later than here in America. And I guess looking into their culture as Americans, just because their days get started later, we could kind of see that as lazy. They don't, they're not getting off to an early start and getting straight to work, is the way that we could look at that. And then as far as being late, there's kind of this misconception that Italians are always late, that they just don't care about appointment times and deadlines. And while it is true that Italians aren't always punctual, there's more to the story than just that they're always late. And we should kind of look into this and think about it from multiple sides and multiple cultural viewpoints, so you don't jump directly to that misconception that they're lazy and don't care about being punctual. And so this misconception, I would say, it stems from the fact that regarding social interactions, Italians aren't very concerned with being exactly on time. So let's say you are talking with a group of friends and you want to go see a movie or grab dinner or something. In Italy, that you might say, okay, let's meet up at 8:00. In Italy, that as far as meeting up with friends, people aren't really focused on getting there exactly 8:00. I know when I have made plans, when I've spent time in Italy, I would say probably you have to get used to maybe leaving the house an hour after you say that you're going to meet up. However, this rule, I guess it's not really a rule, but this idea doesn't, on the other hand, apply to the workplace. It doesn't apply to every aspect of Italian life. Italians do respect meeting times and, for the most part, deadlines when it comes to their jobs, when it comes to schoolwork. This is kind of something where the misconception that they're lazy could come from. If you think that they just don't care and they're not going to get their work done, that's not exactly how it works, and it definitely doesn't work that way in the workplace. So in addition to all this, I would say cultural values also play a big part in the misconception that Italians are lazy. So kind of going off this idea of the workplace, one thing is that food and family are really important to Italians. It's a big part of their culture. It's kind of right at the center of it all. And so for that, people take time off work to go home and they cook a meal and eat it with their family. Also, children don't eat lunch at schools. They go home, they wait until about 1 or 2 o'clock when they get out of school and eat. And so they can eat as a family. And so as far as the workplace goes, if, in America, people might take an hour lunch break is kind of typical. In Italy, it might be more like 2 or maybe even more hours. And again, looking at this as Americans, we could say, oh, they're just trying to avoid their work. And they're lazy. They're more focused on taking time off. But then that's important to bring back into mind what they place value on in their culture. And that is food and family are two big things. And so it's kind of this part of the Italian lifestyle and what's culturally important to them. And so we need to think about that. Just because it's different doesn't make it more right or wrong. And then kind of in addition to that, what Sean was saying about, kernel of truth. Is there a kernel of truth to it? A kernel of truth to the fact that Italians are lazy. I wouldn't go as far as saying they're lazy, but they do. They know how to relax, and they enjoy taking time to relax, which might not be, an American, something that we place importance on in America is being hardworking and independent. And so those are kind of a little bit of opposing cultural importance, cultural centralities. And so, again, just thinking about understanding where these misconceptions come from and why they're there, and realizing that, you know, we, as different cultures and different countries, we have different norms. Yeah, so it's kind of the end of my spiel. And so now we are going to do a final assessment, little activity. So if you all could pull out a piece of paper, it can be just a scrap piece of paper, and write down a couple things regarding the 3 questions that you see on the slide. So what is one thing you learned today from kind of what Sean and I talked about? And then also, what is one topic you want to learn more about, whether it's related to things that we went over today or something that else that popped into your mind regarding cultural misconceptions. And then what is a question you have if we went over something and you wanted to talk about it further. And then we will ask you all to come up and share an answer to any of these questions, and kind of see how the lesson went. So take a couple minutes to do that.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay, so one thing I learned was that slurping
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh, it's frozen.
your soup in China that is good.
Oh.
One more time. It
Yeah.
while you were talking. Sorry.
Sorry about that.
Okay. One thing I learned was that in China, slurping your soup meant that it was good.
Yep, that was something I learned as well today.
One thing I learned today was that Chinese people, like, they get used to having the high density of people around, and also that it's important to understand why misconceptions are there, not just that they're
Yes, definitely important. Anyone else want to share what they learned?
The first thing I learned was that people consider Italians to be lazy, and then on top of that, I learned that they aren't lazy; they just aren't as intentional or punctual as we are.
Yes. Okay, does anyone want to share a question or, yeah, go ahead. Or anything you learned.
I already said, I learned that some things that we do in America can be considered as rude, like in personal space and all that. But in China, it's different. And like the example about Chinese caring about the grades or something or being smart, it's basically because of the culture and that person. of interest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
And also, I think it's important to emphasize that culture is constantly changing. And like now we are seeing more liberty or freedom with kind of without that strict education has to be like pushed down your throat, kind of like this is the one thing be all. And now you see the Chinese culture changing and kind of how students are acting in classes and going about with their education.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, any questions we can answer?
Okay, so out of all the places that you live, what was your favorite place to live in?
For both of us, I guess, or
Yes.
okay, awesome. Emma, do you want to, or you can
Yeah, I can start. So I would say my favorite place that I've lived was when I studied abroad in college. I was in a city called Bologna in Italy, and it's kind of right in the middle of the country. And it's not a huge city, and it's this university is very central to the city, so it's a lot of younger people, and there's lots of stuff to do, lots of museums to go to, great food, and so I'd say that's probably my favorite place that I've ever lived.
And for me, I think I'm definitely biased to Canada because that was where my childhood was kind of located in. But I lived in Halifax, Nova Scotia, which is a very small, to the east coast, right above Maine. Not many people come from there if they come from Canada. And so it's kind of, it's a little niche, like very unique kind of little port city by the sea. It was a small, big city, like a city in the small place. So it was a good mix of both the big city and the rural areas. So, yeah. Is any other questions?
Like in China, apparently like slurping your food is considered polite and stuff like that. What are some other from other places? What are some other things about manners that you see that are like the most interesting?
Wait, I kind of didn't get the end of it, but Emma, did you kind of get?
I think, or you want to come up and repeat it? Maybe that'll be better. It paused for a little bit and we couldn't hear it. Great.
What are some other like things about manners in other countries that are different from here?
Okay. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. Like one that comes to my head immediately is kind of like in England when I was studying abroad there. I noticed that everyone was, because here in the South, we kind of have that idea of Southern hospitality and that everyone's very nice and open and smiles and like waves at you on the street, even though they don't know you. I know a lot of international students who come here and they said that was definitely one of the things they're not used to back at home. But when I was in England, and I tried to smile at people as I was walking down the street, but they just looked at me like I was kind of crazy because, and I took that as rude in the very beginning. But it turns out when I was talking to one of them later on, a person from like actually grew up in Britain and stuff, they're saying how kind of their idea of it is that everyone is going about with their own day and they don't want to bother someone else by kind of like saying hi to them or going out of their way and getting in their path and their kind of idea of where they're going. So that like switches the table, and I was like, oh, that makes so much more sense. It's not out of rudeness. It's because they don't want to bother me, but because of that cultural difference, I at first took that as something rude, but then later understood the real reason behind it.
Yeah, that's similar in Italy as well. Italians are very warm and open, but when you're, walking along the street, you don't really stop and talk to people unless you know them that well, and then you definitely don't smile as you pass by people like you might hear in the States. And then another thing that came to my mind was kind of the culture around food and meal times. Like I said earlier, food is very important to Italian culture, and so rushing through a meal and getting up immediately from the table in Italy can actually be seen as very rude. And that was something I had to get used to over there when I would sit down to meals with my host family and would be finished eating, but then you sit and you stay and maybe up to like an hour after you've actually finished eating, and talk about your day, and that's kind of your time to socialize, and you definitely don't stand up and immediately, clear your plate and get going with something else that might be more of a cultural norm in America. Any other questions?
Okay, so what are some other things that you were taught in those countries that like changed the way you live and like changed your personality?
That's a good question. Yeah.
That is a very good question. For me, I know kind of, and this kind of goes along with my presentation a little bit on laziness, not to say that I've become more lazy, but in Italy, things can move slower, or, as I said, the kernel of truth in that misconception is that Italians do know how to relax and enjoy relaxing. And so I would say that it's changed kind of a little bit of my perception of time, and then also my patience. I have quite a bit of patience, especially, now when I come back to America after being in Italy. It seems like everything moves at a quicker pace here, because when things do move slower over there, I've gotten used to it, and definitely learned to be patient and not rush through things. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the last time that I visited China, which was 2 summers ago, was the first time I visited in 6 years. So there's a huge gap in between when I visited, the 2 times I visited. And all my extended family live in China. So my grandparents, my cousins, my uncles, and so I was not really used to the idea of extended family when I grew up here in the West. But family is a very important aspect of Chinese culture, especially the extended family. I know here it's kind of more focused on nuclear. Not to say everyone is, but the typical idea of family is like a very nuclear, 2 parents, 2 kids, etc. But in China, it's very important to have that core. Family is just very important there, especially having really good relationships with your cousins and your uncles. It's seen as a very good, very high advantage if you have all these connections. And so kind of going back and experiencing that importance of family and having to memorize each person's name and like constantly socializing and trying to talk to everyone and put up a really, like, try to connect and kind of take up that connection that I've lost for so many years was very hard for me. And also understanding the structure, because there is a hierarchical structure within the family, especially with the inequalities between the male and female. Like traditionally wise, the males definitely have more of the power, more of the say, and then also the hierarchy between age. So the respect to elderly is very important. It's definitely when we eat all together, no one can eat before my grandma eats. No one can talk until, or if my grandma starts talking, everyone has to be quiet. Yeah, so there's like a lot of things dealing with family and culture of the family that I had to try to assimilate really quickly into. But they were very kind in that they knew that the American culture and how I grew up over here was very different. And so they didn't take offense to the things I might have done wrong, per se, within the culture. So, Yeah, keep the questions going. I like all these questions are really good. We still have, I think, 2 minutes or so, maybe. So one more question will be good.
Are there some more places that you want to go and learn about, like, misconceptions and, like, stories and stuff?
Yeah.
Other places you might want to travel to learn about other misconceptions? I think
that's a good question.
Yeah, that is awesome. That's an awesome question. So for me, I would love to travel anywhere to learn about misconceptions. I think you know, we have misconceptions about the majority of cultures that you know, that we don't interact with, and that we're not seeing the daily ins and outs of. And so let's see, I'm trying to think of where a couple of top places. I've never been to anywhere in South America, and so I think that they also have a very different culture, and I'm sure I have plenty of misconceptions regarding South American cultures. I have some friends who have traveled there and have enjoyed their time there and getting to know about the culture. So I would say that might be on the top of my list.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've never been to South America. I've never really learned much about that culture over there. And I am like, I don't even know exactly which countries are located in South America, which is horrible. And I should probably knowledge myself on that. But also I think for me, I've definitely noticed within the recent years or within coming to college that just even within the US, we have such a huge variety of different communities and cultures and people, which is amazing in such a rich, diverse area, and can be very fruitful. And so I definitely want to explore more of that within my community. I know at Chapel Hill, we have a bunch of different organizations and such. And so I've been trying to putting myself out there with the Latinx community, because I'm not really knowledgeable on that. So that's something I'm doing for myself here. Yeah, but I think that is all we have time for. But that was really enjoyable. Thank you all for listening. Yeah, it's a great start for the semester. I can't wait to talk and learn more with you all. Do you have any ending things, Emma?
I don't think so. Those were awesome questions. So we can keep that up for next time, and just remember the importance of looking at things from more than one side.
All right. Thank you, guys. Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Bye.